first I want to say obesity and like fat gain and everything. The cause is not carbohydrates. The cause is insulin, specifically insulin resistance. When you have insulin resistance, then you're going to have a really hard time losing weight, even if you're moving more or um, uh, eating certain foods or whatever. It's going to be hard. That's why, like, when people are in the gym and they exercise a bunch and they're not losing weight, and they're like, well, dang it, what's going on? Part of the story is insulin resistance. Okay, so I see Teresa's in here. Supersize It. Yeah, we do that, right? There was that documentary, Supersize It, about here in America. And anyone else here, say hello. Let me know you're here. So, the nerd that I am, I prepared for this. I started writing a few little bullet points. I got a lot of bullet points as to why some of the other countries might be eating higher carbohydrate diets and not necessarily losing weight. So insulin resistance is, I believe, the key factor here. And let me just say this, that there is no smoking gun of exactly this is the thing as to why some of these other people can have more carbs. The fact is, there's really a lot of things going into it, okay? Some of it is genetics, right? So what your parents ate, what their parents ate, and what their parents ate, and so on and so forth, all affect the way that you handle food and process food and everything. So if you live, say, in an Asian culture and your family goes back thousands of years eating certain starches, whether it be rice or sweet potatoes or something, then your body is probably well adapted to processing that. And then, you might not be eating all day long, because here's the deal. Weight gain and weight loss is very much a hormonal thing. In fact, it is a hormonal thing, okay? Like insulin, hormones with insulin. Well, hormones are meant to go up and then go down. In other words, turn on and then turn off, turn on and turn off. They're not meant to be turned on and stay on all the time. So when you wake up in the morning, you get a little glucose from cortisol spike, but this cortisol goes down. And then you might eat something and you get a little blood glucose spike, and then it goes down, and your insulin goes up, and then it goes down. It kind of goes up and goes down. And then maybe you chill out for a little while, and the insulin stays down. But when you eat constantly, and these hormones are always being activated, and when you're consuming things like high fructose corn syrup, or even worse, that gets the insulin resistance going. High levels of insulin that stay high then start to form insulin resistance. And then you get more insulin, and that creates more insulin resistance, and then more insulin and more insulin resistance. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments if that makes sense. Okay, so here's some other little notes that I made on this. So eating frequently, I kind of mentioned that. Hormones meant to go on and off. Carbs don't necessarily cause insulin resistance. What causes insulin resistance is high insulin, lots of insulin, right? Okay, so with Asian cultures, for example, they eat a lot of whole foods that are more nutrient dense than maybe here in the Western cultures. And the thing is that those whole foods, okay, remember our core strategy number 2 of weight loss here is a nutrient-dense diet, because what's inside and how all your workers do everything when you put the food in your mouth matter. How is it being processed in your body? So when they eat these whole foods, okay, when they grab it from the ground and it goes to their table, or maybe they're buying it from a farmer's market more often than we do. That's a very nutrient-dense kind of food that they would be eating. Whereas here in America, you get a sweet potato, and unless you're buying it from your local farmer right down the road, what's going to happen? It gets farmed somewhere. Who knows what that soil was like? Was it sprayed with something like glyphosate? Then it gets picked by who knows who, puts on a truck, it's delivered so many miles somewhere, maybe air freighted somewhere, then that's packaged up or whatever, and then sometimes they might even throw dirt on it to make it look dirty again. I've heard that happening before. And then it has to be delivered to your grocery store. Then you get it. There's a huge difference in the food. My next door neighbor has an apricot tree, and my mom, who I know is watching right now, she had bought some apricots from Costco, and we did a taste test between the one I picked off the tree and the one she bought at Costco, and I mean it was night and day difference, and I guarantee you the nutrient profile of that fruit was a night and day difference as well. So Asian cultures, for example, eat a lot of ginger and garlic and some anti-inflammatory foods. So inflammation is like the root cause of almost every single disease that's out there. And what we want is a low inflammatory diet, low inflammation. And ginger and garlic and like turmeric are really, really good anti-inflammatories. So they might be consuming a little bit more of that. So what else here? Okay, so we mentioned food. They eat more like vegetables and fish, someone had mentioned, that I mentioned at the start of this. Well, think too what else they eat, and what we eat when it comes to meat. So here in the Western culture, we tend to eat more of the muscle meat, right? The protein muscle meat. But in some of these other cultures that have like a higher carbohydrate kind of diet, well, they don't just eat the muscle meat, but they eat all of it. Like they'll eat the organ pieces, the tongue, the cheek. They're getting this collagen protein from tongue and cheek and stuff like that. But they're also eating certain organs. Now, organ meat is fattier than your lean protein meat, which is what we tend to be eating more in the Western world. That lean protein meat will raise your insulin higher. And what is the cause of obesity and weight loss and weight gain and everything? Insulin resistance and high insulin levels. The lean protein is going to raise the insulin, not as much as carbs, but it will still raise it. However, the organ meats are more fat. They're more fatty meats. And so that doesn't raise it. It will raise it a little bit, but it does not raise the insulin as high. And then when you combine that with like the vegetables, which has fiber, and that fiber will slow the absorption of those carbohydrates. And they have, like we said, they tend to have a much higher vegetable content. They're probably getting less of a spike in blood glucose because of all the other things that they're doing versus having some rice with the lean muscle meat that we eat with maybe French fries, and we down it with a big soda or something like that, right? They're drinking green tea. The way they kind of cook their foods. So like, for example, here in America, we boil, we fry things. Oh, frying things is terrible. We'll take all the nutrients out. We'll kill the nutrients in it. We roast, we bake, we barbecue, we char things really good and everything. These things can cause inflammation. These things can take the nutrients out of food. Whereas in Eastern cultures, they're steaming, stewing, sauteing, braising. And if they fry something, they're frying it really quick in a wok. And when they're braising something, or they're cooking it in something like a stew or something, they tend to use a lot of the bones. We tend to like say, hey, goodbye bones. Let's just put in like the meat and maybe some potatoes and carrots or something, right? Well, those bones will extract vitamins and nutrients. And again, those micronutrients in our body. If you watched our last live stream on micronutrients on Tuesday, we talked about how the micronutrients are the little factory workers inside of us that make all of this stuff work. So Teresa says, don't mean to go back, but does the slowing of hormone production have anything to do with it being harder in losing weight when you get older? Yes. It does. Things tend to work slower as you get older. You know, your cells, your mitochondria, your energy factories and everything tend to start working slower. Diet, exercise, maintaining stress, proper supplementation, these things, and avoiding reactive foods and reactive habits like smoking, all of those things will help contribute to bringing those things a little bit back in line. But you have to work with data. You have to work with data, blood work, proper blood work, not one that the crappy one that your doctor will do that insurance covers. You need like a functional medicine doctor to really do a full blood work profile, because your standard doctor probably won't be, they probably won't even test your vitamin D unless you ask for it. Okay, anybody have any wine? Macadamia nuts? Oh, so good. Okay, what about, let's see, what else do I have written here? I wrote, okay, vinegar. So a lot of the other cultures who eat a high carbohydrate diet, you know, let's just say like Asian cultures, they have like rice wine vinegar, a lot of vinegar in their cooking, whereas Western cultures, maybe not as much. You know, I'm here in America, so I can speak more toward America. I mean, we don't cook a ton with vinegar. You get a little bit of vinegar, like balsamic vinegar here and there, or maybe in your barbecue sauce, which would be a lot of sugar and everything, typically. But we don't cook with a ton of vinegar. Well, vinegar, the really, really cool thing about vinegar is like it's like a Superman in food with carbohydrates and stuff. If you consume vinegar with your carbohydrates, your blood glucose will spike less. If you think you're going to have like a carbohydrate kind of meal, where maybe you're going to have some potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, or you know, a bunch of carrots or something like that, then what you do is get a tablespoon of like apple cider vinegar and dilute it with like a tablespoon of water so it's a little more palatable, and just shoot that. And then you eat your food. Your blood glucose is going to spike less. The vinegar is going to make it spike less. And as far as I know, they still don't know exactly the mechanisms in it. There's some speculation on it, but it is the truth. If you go to Instagram, there's this girl on Instagram. Her name is Jessie, and she goes by Glucose Goddess. She has one of those continuous blood glucose monitors on her, and she keeps testing. And she has this app, and the app will show her blood glucose spikes and everything over time. And she continually tests different foods and clearly shows in her testing how consuming vinegar before her meals lowers the blood glucose spike pretty much every time. Really cool stuff. So what I'm saying here is that, you know, there's a lot of factors going in here as to why some of these other cultures can eat higher carbohydrates. Carbs are not the devil. Carbs do not cause obesity. They can contribute. Insulin resistance and high levels of insulin causes weight gain, weight stalls, obesity. There's, you know, some other things with weight stalls and stuff, but in general, that is it. So let's see here. Carbs come in different forms. So here's one that I'd like to hit on that, you know, not everyone totally agrees, but I mean, scientifically looking at it, I'm kind of an amateur astronomer in a way, maybe an amateur astronomer, but I took 2 years of physics in college, okay? So I know a little bit about science. Not all carbs are created equal. Not all carbs are the same. So you have some carbohydrates that are simple carbohydrates that are just glucose molecule, right? One glucose molecule goes right into the bloodstream, gets used up right away, spikes up that insulin, right, or your blood glucose right away, which causes the insulin to raise up. And so that would be things like candies, desserts, soda, and stuff like that. You have other carbs are like, let's say, fructose, which is a hidden killer. I'll circle back to that, the fructose thing here in just a moment. But Yeah, so another carb would be starches, complex carbohydrates. Okay, these are different than simple sugars. This is a whole chain of simple sugars, and they get processed differently in the body, just like fructose. Fructose doesn't get processed the same way as something like glucose does. You have sucrose. Sucrose is two molecules, a glucose molecule and a fructose molecule. So it's kind of double bad. It goes in and it raises your blood sugar right away, and then it goes to the liver where it causes other issues. And then you have fiber. Fiber is a carbohydrate. And fiber tends to not really raise blood sugar that much and slows down the absorption of the carbohydrates that do spike your blood sugar. So circling back to fructose. And let me know if this stuff is interesting at all or you're finding it useful. Because understanding that carbs is not necessarily the devil here, it's more of insulin. And I'll talk about a little bit on insulin, some other things other than carbs that raise insulin here in just a moment. But if this stuff is interesting, let me know. I'm curious. So let's see what else I put on here. Asian cultures have missed added sugars and then less impact of insulin resistance I wrote down. So added sugars, by that I mean like they haven't, up until around 2000-ish, they hadn't had issues, big bouts with like obesity and stuff until like the Western culture started bringing in a lot of the high fructose corn syrup, the simple sugars, all the desserts and everything like that. Like what Jana said in her comment. And then they're eating rice on top of it. That is causing a lot of metabolic dysfunction. Okay, and when we help people lose weight, the idea is don't just try to lose weight by eating less carbs. The idea is lose weight by becoming metabolically healthy. Elizabeth, what's happening? Hey, I'm here live. I got my glass of wine. I hope you don't mind. And I still haven't had any of my cheeses yet, so I've got, or my snacks. I got some macadamia nuts. I got my blueberries and a little bit of cheese, Parmesan cheese. I mean, goes good with wine, right? Okay. So I'm going to give you an interesting idea to think about here. I even wrote, I don't know if you can see, but interesting idea. So I thought to myself when I was thinking about with other cultures how they can eat higher carbs and stuff. What if we fed everybody basically the same diet? Okay? What if everybody had the same basic diet and we gave them the same kind of insulin resistance? Give them all the same insulin resistance. What we would see is that not everybody would get fat. Not everybody would become obese, even though they have the same insulin resistance and even though they eat the same diet. I mean, why is that? Well, genetics could definitely be a huge factor in that. Why do some people grow tall, right? Some people gain lots of weight. I remember my doctor when I had a hernia at one point, and then we were talking and everything, and we were talking about my weight, and he was jealous because I have the opposite problem that most people have. I have the problem of trying to keep weight on me. And when I go very low carb, I lose a lot of weight, and I'm not hungry because it doesn't stimulate appetite, but I need to eat. The thing is that there's no smoking gun as to why this happens. I put on here some likely reasons. Genetics, like I said. Issues with individual people's gut flora. Thyroid issues. We can give everybody the same diet, same insulin resistance, but if one person has a thyroid problem and the other person does not, one person can probably either lose weight easier or not become overweight or anything. Maybe their omega-6 to omega-3 ratios are off. Sleep, stress, micronutrients, selenium maybe, they have a deficiency there, or chromium. Toxicity is another one. So my wife, and the reason why I go to to thyroid is she had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which, by the way, she's over there, we got into remission through diet and lifestyle and toxicity. So what we learned through our functional medicine doctor, her A1C was staying high, even though she was on a low-carb diet. And it's like, well, what's going on? Is it stress? Is it what? Well, we got all the blood work, and our functional medicine doctor pinpointed it. He said she's got heavy metal toxicity. So we did a detox on that, and we got the blood test again afterward. It's put into remission now. So her thyroid now is better, and her prediabetes, despite being low carb, her prediabetes came down to now normal levels because of the toxicity. So that kind of leads me to movement, okay? So some people will say that other cultures can eat more carbohydrates because they get out and they move a lot more and stuff. Yes, okay, that does absolutely is part of it. When I worked at the Hard Rock Hotel, I was a banquet server, and I was eating low carb, but I was also walking like 5 to 10 miles a day, and I lost so much weight. I was too low, and it was challenging to eat enough food. So movement certainly can make you lose weight. But there's a big part of this story here. It's not that simple, okay? So in a normal, healthy person who's metabolically healthy, move more, lose weight, right? In someone who has insulin resistance, moving more doesn't necessarily mean losing weight. Where else did I want to go with that? So, okay, moving more, calories. And the reason why this is all relating back to, well, why can some cultures have more rice, let's say, or potatoes than other cultures and not have obesity? Because sometimes people say, well, they move more. And I'm saying that insulin resistance is the cause of obesity. And moving more can contribute to weight loss. So calories in, calories out. I'm going to explain this, try to explain it in a nutshell here real quick, because that's kind of what the movement is, right? Calories in, you do a lot of movement and everything, you burn calories so you lose weight. Well, understand that, first of all, the only energy that we have in our body that is used up, like the currency, I could say, of energy in our bodies is something called ATP. I won't get into that. For now, we'll just call it calories. Okay, you don't burn calories, you actually use ATP, you burn ATP. So, but we'll just say calories, okay? Well, when you exercise, you burn calories, right? But the problem is that most of the calorie burning, I would say, I don't even know if it's most, but a lot of the calorie burning going on inside of you is not the exercise, it's out of your control. Heartbeat, brain, thinking, blood pressure, blood temperature, what's your liver doing right now? What's your stomach doing right now? Your hair is growing. You have whatever else going on in your body. I can't think of anything right now, but there's your spleen has to function. Your kidneys have to function, right? Well, do they just function just because they function? They function because they use energy. And they use ATP, but we're just saying calories for right now to keep the discussion simple. You have no control over this. So when you move more and you reduce, and now let's say, you want to lower calories. So you're at a 2,000 per day calorie amount, and you want to lower it to, let's say, 1,500 calories a day because you want to lose weight or whatever, more movement so you can have more carbs or something like that. So you lower the calories. Well, when you lower calories, your body's not going to stay up here saying, hey, I'm just going to keep burning 2,000. It's going to say, well, wait a second. I only have 1,500 coming in. I got a heart to beat. I got a brain that needs thinking. So I'm going to bring down the calories. In fact, it might not even bring it down to 1,500. It might say, hey, I'm going to bring it down to 1,400 just in case this wise guy decides to bring it down again. I want to have a little in reserve. So your body is going to bring down the calorie burn. And now what does that mean? Well, that means all of a sudden, maybe you're not going to start thinking very well. Maybe your hair, your body's going to say, hey, it takes energy to grow hair, but the heart is more important. So we're going to divert energy from hair growth, and we're going to make sure the heart keeps beating and that the brain has power. And then you start feeling sluggish and tired. And then what do you do on top of it? Now you start working out. And I know maybe I'm going on a tangent here. Let me know if the tangent is something that is interesting, by the way. I'm just curious if this is interesting at all. But now you're throwing fuel on the fire because now, you know, your body's saying, hey, I'm stressed out a little bit because I'm not getting the energy that I need. But now you're going out to the gym and you're working out. And now you're going to try and burn more calories on it. And you're just stressing the body out even more, right? So then weight stalls can happen. So moving more can help you to lose weight. Absolutely. And you can earn your carbohydrates. Absolutely. But just keep in mind that the reason why they can eat more of the carbohydrate foods and everything likely is because they have good metabolic health and no insulin resistance. That's probably, in my opinion, the biggest contributing factor going in there. Because here is one last tip or one last thought on the movement thing, and then I'll get off of this subject. So if being sedentary, having a sedentary lifestyle, not really exercising much and stuff, if that's not the cause of obesity, it can't be the answer, right? Exercise and movement can't be the answer to obesity if it's not what the cause is. The cause was something different. Fix the cause, you can have a little more carbs. So let's see, I mentioned nutrient-dense diet more that they have over there versus our nutrient-poor, sprayed with glyphosate and grain-fed beef and everything like that over here. I was going to say, so if insulin is the thing that, and specifically like insulin resistance is a big driver, if not the driver of obesity and fat gain and everything like that, well, then, you know, carbs is not the only factor in insulin being spiked up. There's other things that can raise up insulin, which I have a few off the top of my head, but I know I wrote them down here. What did I write down on here for me? Well, things that can spike some insulin, they actually have done a study on dairy. So like Asian cultures don't really consume a whole lot of dairy. Dairy, though, in many cases doesn't spike blood glucose, it can spike insulin. You might not have known that, right? And it gets a little into it there because when it's the protein, basically, specifically whey protein, that will spike up insulin or raise insulin levels. So dairy can raise insulin, which is interesting because on a low-carb diet, we can have some dairy, right, and still lose weight. Let's see here. What else do we have? So some other things that can maybe bring up insulin could be like, let's say, artificial sweeteners. So saccharin. There was a study where sucralose, even though that's like Splenda, and found in all kinds of low-carb drinks, even though they didn't really spike up blood glucose, they did have an insulin response on there. Toxicity could bring up insulin as well. Okay, so I put a kind of a last little note on the last page that I have here that I wrote that I'd like to kind of leave you with. A high intake of whole, nutrient-dense carbohydrate foods, okay? Whole, nutrient-dense carbohydrate foods does not seem to cause insulin resistance. But high sugar processed foods and a nutrient poor diet does. There's just something about sugar, let me tell you. There's something about sugar that is just so incredibly bad. And I forgot to mention, for anyone still watching, thanks if you're still watching, I said I was going to mention something on fructose. And I think I'd like to mention about that right now, because fructose is a hidden kind of thing where it's like I'll say a hidden killer even, because here in the Western culture, we hear eat lots of fruits and vegetables, right? Eat lots of fruits. Fruit doesn't spike blood glucose the way like glucose does, and desserts and breads and everything like that. Well, the thing with fructose is that it doesn't necessarily go right to the bloodstream. It goes, does anybody know, by the way, where does fructose first go to get processed? Do you know? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious. It's the liver, right? So fructose, the reason why when you eat fructose, like fruit or something, it's not spiking blood glucose immediately is because it's going to the liver first to be processed. And if there's already glucose in the body and everything, then what happens? Insulin pushes it into the cells, right? Insulin pushes it into the cells. The more we consume, the more insulin comes in to push it in the cells, and then we start to become what? Insulin resistant, because it's too much insulin. So then your liver that's having to shove all this fructose into the liver as fat, it starts to become insulin resistant. It's like, hey, I got no more room. I got no more room for you to bring fructose to me. Okay, so stop. But what happens? You keep eating it. High fructose corn syrup, the sodas, or fruit high in sugars and everything like that. So now what happens is you start to develop insulin resistance in your liver. And you can have insulin resistance in different parts of the body. Your brain could be not insulin resistant, and your liver could be. Well, so now what happens is you pump more insulin because you're still consuming that fructose. And now you're shoving even more of that sugar, that fructose, into the liver and store it as fat. And you're storing more and more, and you keep going and keep going. And all of a sudden, what do you know? Fatty liver disease is a thing, right? Fructose is dangerous. Too much of fructose is dangerous. I try not to eat very much of it. I'll have a little bit of some apple slices every now and then with my food at dinner time. Blueberries, raspberries, really good, low in sugar. But yeah. So anyways, that's kind of my take. Very interesting, Teresa says. Awesome. Glad that you like it. So I hope that you kind of got a little bit out of this. I had fun talking about it because this stuff is interesting to me. But that's kind of, why do some cultures get to eat more carbohydrates? If I had to sum that up here at the end for you, I would say ultimately the cause you always have to look at is insulin and insulin resistance. All right? And does that community have insulin resistance? If they don't, then they're probably processing their carbohydrates pretty well. Are they eating a nutrient-dense diet or a nutrient-poor diet? Because that will make a difference at how everything's being processed inside your body. And are they stressed? Are they not stressed? Because that's going to make a difference as well. And the carbohydrates, are they highly refined carbohydrates? Are we talking bread and things mixed in for preservatives and everything? Or are we talking something that was pulled from the ground and made? Another one, by the way, was on rice. Cooking and then cooling rice, by the way, if you cool the rice and then consume it, or even if you cool it and reheat it, it becomes a little more of a resistant starch. And what that means is it means it's more like a fiber. So it's not going to spike your blood glucose as much. So if you think about it, a lot of Asian communities probably eat rice hot, but they probably also reheat a lot of rice or eat cold rice even, sushi or whatever. And that doesn't necessarily spike your blood glucose as much as when the starch was cooked hot and consumed hot. All right, thanks so much for watching. I had a lot of fun here, and if you watch the replay, give me a shout out, say hello. I'd love to know that you're here. Thanks so much, everybody, and you take care. Now I need to figure out, oh yeah, there's the finish button.